My grandma gave my cousin the vineyard I built from scratch and called me self-sufficient, like it was a compliment. So I handed her a folder proof of 6 years of fraud under my name at her retirement party. The clink of champagne glasses echoed through the vineyard courtyard, where lanterns swayed gently over white linen tables. A string quartet played something soft and expensive sounding in the background. My heels clicked against the cobblestone as I walked toward the main terrace, trying to remember why I had agreed to dress up for a party I hadn't asked for. My name is Zara. I'm 32 years old and I've lived in Sonoma, California my whole life. Tonight was my grandmother's retirement gala, the woman who built Verena Ridge Vineyards from dirt and ambition. The whole estate had been transformed into a magazine spread. Rows of fairy lights, curated flower arrangements, a menu printed in gold foil. Guests in suits and gowns sipping vintage Cabernet like it meant something. I watched my cousin Mila flutter through the crowd in a lavender chiffon dress, her laugh high and airy, like a wind chime. She kissed cheeks, posed for photos, whispered in people's ears like she owned the air they were breathing. She didn't work here. Not really. She posted about it online, sure. But the books, the logistics, the brand partnerships, that had been me. Nights and weekends, spreadsheets and supplier calls, unpaid internships I never got credit for. But no one seemed to remember that now. When the speeches started, everyone gathered around the main pergola. Grandma stood at the center, her silver hair pinned perfectly, holding a glass of rose in one hand and a microphone in the other. Her voice was rich, practiced. She thanked the guests, the staff, the loyal customers. She praised the estate, the heritage, the years of hard work. Then she turned to Mila. This vineyard has always been about family, she said, her smile wide enough to hide the knife. And I can think of no one better to carry on the Verena legacy than my beautiful granddaughter Mila. Applause. Cheers. Someone actually said, "Hear, hear." Mila gasped like she didn't already know. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth, eyes glistening. Grandma reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. The deed will be transferred by the end of the month. People started clapping again. Some stood. Mila hugged her, clutching the paper like it was a newborn baby. I didn't move. I didn't smile. And of course, Grandma said, turning toward me just slightly, Zara doesn't need accolades. She finds joy in others' success. The words landed with a dull thud. A few people glanced my way. I nodded politely. Smiled the kind of smile you wear when your jaw is locked. I didn't argue. Didn't make a scene. I just walked toward the head table, opened my purse, and took out a sealed manila folder. Congratulations, Grandma, I said, placing it gently beside her wine glass. She looked surprised. Not threatened, just curious. What's this, sweetheart? Just a few things I thought you should have, I said softly. Then I turned, smoothed the front of my navy dress, and walked back into the crowd, past the clapping, the champagne, the fairy lights, all of it suddenly as fake as Mila's laugh. Back then, I used to think staying quiet was the same as being strong. When I was in college, I'd come home every other weekend to help with the vineyard. Grandma called it hands-on learning. I called it doing payroll, organizing events, and rebuilding our outdated supply chain software, all without a paycheck. Mila was supposed to help too, but she usually couldn't make it, or was feeling off. Somehow, I was always the one on the floor at 2 a.m. scrubbing stains out of rented tablecloths while Mila posted filtered selfies with wine glasses she didn't pour. But if I ever said anything, I was labeled the serious one. The stiff. The killjoy. I remember one time in particular. I had just come back from my junior year abroad in Bordeaux, where I'd spent 6 months studying vineyard economics. Mila had just failed a hospitality internship in San Diego, forgot to show up 3 days in a row. Grandma threw her just because brunch and gave her a new Audi, said she needed a fresh start. I got a pat on the back and a list of broken accounting processes to clean up. I asked Grandma about it once. How come Mila gets celebrated for showing up late and I get another spreadsheet? She smiled at me like I was being silly. Because you're reliable, darling. Mila needs the encouragement. You're more self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. That was the label they gave me instead of love. Like I didn't need acknowledgement because I didn't ask for it. I never got birthday parties growing up. Grandma always said summer was our busiest time. Mila got a catered Sweet 16 in the wine cellar with a photo booth and a string quartet. I poured drinks for guests and drove home in my dad's pickup. But I stayed quiet. Because speaking up made people uncomfortable. Because in my family, discomfort meant disloyalty. And loyalty? That was everything. At Mila's 23rd birthday, I was the one who ordered the wine, managed the RSVP list, and cleaned up the vomit in the guest's bathroom. She made a toast halfway through dinner, raising her glass and saying, "Thanks to everyone who helped pull this together. Especially Grandma." I looked at my hands in my lap and told myself it didn't matter. That what mattered was the vineyard staying afloat. I got used to being invisible. I told myself it was humility, grace, strength. But it was rot, really. And it had been growing under the surface for years. They called me grateful. Said I was the rock of the family. What they meant was, I didn't complain when they leaned on me until I cracked. And they were about to find out just how many cracks they'd made. It started with a payment alert. Just a small email from a supplier I didn't recognize. Final reminder. Invoice balance overdue. Remit payment to avoid disruption. It was addressed to me. My full name, business credentials, everything. First I thought it was a scam. Then I checked the order number. It matched our distribution logs. 6 cases of reserve Syrah, confirmed delivery signed for digitally. I hadn't authorized that shipment. I waited until after hours, when the vineyard was quiet and the admin office smelled like coffee grounds and dust. The estate manager had gone home. Mila was probably off somewhere live streaming wine pairings with her friends. I logged into the back end of our distributor portal. Not just that shipment, there were dozens. Orders I didn't recognize. All under my login. All co-signed by MV and occasionally, H. Verena, Mila and Grandma. The further I scrolled, the worse it got. Forged authorizations. Invoices marked paid by Zara. Contracts renewed under my business profile, sometimes with digital signatures that had clearly been lifted and pasted. They'd been using my credentials. I sat there staring at the monitor, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I remembered setting up the system in the first place, the email structure, the passwords, the file naming conventions. Grandma had said it was easier this way, if everything funneled through my account. Back then I thought it was trust, delegation, but now it looked a lot like theft. I spent the next few nights pulling records. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to be sure. I checked tax documents, supplier contracts, shipping logs, even the legal archive from the estate's rebrand 4 years ago. My name was everywhere. They hadn't just forgotten to include me. They had used me for years. I wasn't the invisible helper. I was the paper trail. They'd used my identity to cover unapproved purchases, backdate payments, sign off on vendor shifts, and even divert funds for something labeled event sponsorship. When I dug deeper, that event turned out to be Mila's influencer retreat in Napa. The one she described as a brand gift from the universe. It was a brand gift from my name. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Not yet. I felt cold. Like someone had handed me a wine glass filled with snowmelt. By the end of the week I had everything printed, itemized, highlighted, stamped. I created a master folder labeled Usage and Misuse, 2017 to 2023. Then I made a second copy, and a third. On the last page I attached a sticky note. Authorization is a gift, not a given. And I sealed it all inside a plain manila folder. I didn't know when I'd give it to her, only that I would. And when I did, it would be the only thing in that room louder than a cheer. Back at the vineyard, dessert was being served. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone at the next table made a joke about naming the next rose Mila's Magic. She giggled like she'd already trademarked it. I sat near the end of the table, a half-finished creme brulee in front of me. I hadn't touched it. My spoon sat untouched on the linen napkin, catching reflections from the crystal chandelier above. Grandma reached for the manila folder casually, like it might be a handwritten letter or a scrapbook page. A few guests were still talking, their voices blending with the clatter of silverware and wine chatter. She peeled the clasp open, slid the documents out, tilted her glasses down. The first thing she saw was a table of contents, personal credential misuse and financial exposure summary. Her smile didn't vanish right away. First it just flickered, like a porch light sensing a storm. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Her hand moved slower. A single breath caught in her throat. Then she stopped chewing. Mila, still glowing from the high of public praise, leaned over. "What's that, Gran?" "More love letters." Grandma didn't answer. Her fingers tightened slightly on the papers. I watched her shoulders pull back. That upright posture she used when giving press interviews. A subtle panic setting in. Her eyes scanned the transfers, the authorizations, the financial notes, all highlighted, documented, time-stamped. What is this?" she asked, voice low. Mila leaned further. "Wait, why is my name?" She snatched one of the pages from Grandma's hands, her confidence slipping as her eyes darted down the lines. "Digital signature, MV, Mila Verena," she read aloud, brow furrowing. This isn't real. Right? This has to be some mix-up." I sipped my water slowly, not saying a word. The table began to quiet. Across from me, one of our longtime investors set down his glass. A former vineyard manager leaned slightly to see the page. Conversations softened into murmurs, then into silence. Grandma turned another page. Her lips pressed tight. "You forged my signature," she said to no one in particular. "What?" Mila's voice cracked. "No, I never. Zara must have put this together wrong, or misread the logs or something. This looks..." I don't know what this is. Grandma didn't even look at her. She kept reading page after page. Financial reports. Email logs. A flag fraud notice from our glass supplier. Co-signed by Mila. Mila stopped pretending after that. Okay, she said, tossing the page down. So what? It was a couple purchases. For the business. For growth. You always said we needed to modernize. But under Zara's credentials? Grandma snapped. A few guests had stood up quietly, stepping away from the table. I finally leaned forward, resting my elbows lightly on the edge of the tablecloth. 6 years of co-signed decisions, I said. All traced to my name. All undocumented. All without my consent. Mila laughed nervously. Come on, Zara. Don't act like you didn't know what was happening. I didn't, I said flatly. But I do now. The entire table had gone still. Even the band had stopped mid-song, a string player holding his bow in midair. Mila opened her mouth, then closed it. Her voice was gone. Grandma stared down at the folder, one hand clenched around her champagne flute, the other gripping the edge of the table. The color had drained from her face. The only sound was the buzz of a wine fly circling a half-empty glass. The room had turned cold. And I hadn't even stood up yet. I can't believe you do this at her party, Mila snapped. This is supposed to be a celebration. Her voice cracked with the edge of performance, that polished PR tone she used in Instagram videos. But the wobble was there now. The panic underneath. I stayed seated. This isn't a scene, I said calmly. It's an audit. Grandma lifted her eyes from the last page, her jaw tight, her cheeks pale. Why didn't you come to me directly? I did, I said, my voice even. Every time I worked through the night. Every time I fixed a supplier issue. Every time I asked to talk and you told me to be grateful for the exposure. The silence around the table was suffocating now. Forks had stopped clinking. Conversations had died hours ago. The air was thick with something bitter. Mila stood up, her chair scraping sharply behind her. You're trying to destroy us. You think this makes you noble? It just makes you petty. Manipulative. I turned toward her slowly. No, I said, meeting her eyes. This makes me done. She blinked. I kept this vineyard running through 3 drought seasons. I rebuilt the customer loyalty program from scratch. I signed the distributor contracts you couldn't even read. And I did it all without a title, without a salary, and without a shred of credit. I paused. Let the silence do its work. You didn't pick me because you couldn't control me, I said. You picked Mila because she looked better on a wine label. Grandma opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to close a chapter. I reached into my purse and pulled out a second envelope. It was thinner than the first, white, crisp, addressed in clean block letters. What is that? Grandma asked. My formal resignation, I said, placing it in front of her. Effective immediately. I'm withdrawing all access to my credentials, intellectual property, and name. I've already submitted paperwork to revoke any shared permissions across the brand accounts. Legal documentation's in the back. You don't mean this, Grandma said. Her voice had dropped to something low urgent. You don't just walk away from family. I finally stood. You walked away first, I said. You just did it with a smile. Mila scoffed. So what, you're going to post some dramatic call-out and cancel us? Tell people the big bad wine family exploited poor little Zara. I looked her dead in the eye. No, I said. I don't need to cancel anyone. I just need to stop covering for you. She didn't have a comeback this time. I scanned the faces at the table. Aunt Linda, who once told me I should smile more in meetings. Uncle Theo, who always called me the spare. The Vineyard staff, some of whom looked stunned, others quietly relieved. I met Grandma's eyes one last time. You taught me about soil. About how to cut vines low so they root deeper. You said the best fruit comes from the hardest seasons. She swallowed. I did. I think I finally understand what you meant. Then I nodded. Once. Final. And walked away from the table. The clapping had stopped. The cameras were down. The only sound behind me was the soft shuffle of paper as someone flipped back through the folder, page by damning page. I didn't storm off. I didn't slam doors or throw one last cutting remark over my shoulder. I just walked. Through the terrace, down the gravel path lined with lights that suddenly felt too bright. Past guests pretending to check their phones. Past the old barn that still held the rusted barrel racks we never replaced. The celebration faded behind me like a song I didn't like in the first place. I passed the rows of vines where I used to prune after school. I remembered that first summer, 17 years old, gloves 2 sizes too big, Grandma teaching me how to snip above the 3rd bud. It's not just about the fruit, she'd said. It's about the discipline. The knowing when to cut. Back then I thought that was about grapes. Now I wasn't so sure. The gravel crunched under my flats as I walked down the slope. I didn't feel angry. Or victorious. I didn't feel much of anything, to be honest. Except free. Not the kind of free you celebrate with fireworks or tattoos. The kind of free that creeps in slow, like exhaling after holding your breath for too many years. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the time I reached the outer gate, I pulled it out. 17 missed messages. Mila. Grandma. Aunt Linda. A few numbers I didn't recognize. I opened one. Mila, this was supposed to be a happy night. You really couldn't wait one day. Then another. Grandma, Zara, sweetheart, please. Let's talk. There's a way to fix this that doesn't involve walking away. Then another. Aunt Linda, I'm sorry if you felt excluded. But you've always been the stable one. That's not a bad thing. I put the phone back in my purse. Let them spin their stories. Let them call me difficult or dramatic or ungrateful. I wasn't giving them anything else to chew on. I reached the edge of the vineyard where the gravel met the asphalt. My car was parked under a lamppost alone. I clicked the fob and the taillights blinked red. I looked back once, just once. The estate glowing softly on the hill, all glass and gold and curated charm. And I felt nothing. Not regret. Not sadness. Just quiet. Like the land after a harvest. Rows stripped clean. Air finally still. I got in my car and turned the ignition. The engine hummed to life, low, steady, like breath returning to a chest. I pulled out onto the road without music. Just the sound of tires turning against the earth. Behind me, the vineyard shrank in the rearview mirror. And with every mile, the weight on my chest lightened. Not because they let go of me, but because I finally let go of them. 3 days passed. I didn't answer any messages. Not the texts, not the missed calls, not the emails with subject lines like, let's talk, please, or you owe us that much. I turned off read receipts. Blocked Mila after she sent a 3-minute voice memo that started with I know you think you're the victim, and ended with you've seriously ruined everything. I didn't feel ruined. I felt still. On the morning of the 3rd day, my phone rang again, this time with a number I hadn't seen in months. Dad. I let it buzz for a while before answering. Hey, I said flat. He hesitated. It's good to hear your voice. I heard about the party. Of course he had. Even from 2 states away, he always heard things. Through cousins, old coworkers, the social vines that carried gossip better than any freight truck ever carried wine. You okay? He asked. I looked out the window. The sky was gray, soft with coastal fog. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, and a delivery van idled at the corner. I'm fine. There was a pause, then, your grandmother says it's the darkest chapter of her life. I didn't flinch. Now she knows what mine felt like. He exhaled. You always had a sharp tongue. No, I said. I just stopped swallowing everything. Another pause. He didn't push. That was the thing with Dad, he never fought the wave. He just watched it hit and waited for it to go quiet again. Anything you need from me? He asked. No, I said. But thanks. He didn't say goodbye. Just a low hum, then the click of the line going dead. I sat there a moment longer. Phone still in my hand. The weight of his silence felt cleaner than the rest. Not quite support. But not judgment either. Just absence that didn't demand to be filled. That afternoon, Mila started posting cryptic quotes on her Instagram stories. White font on a beige background. Things like, sometimes the knife in your back comes from the hand you trusted most. Rebirth is painful, but betrayal hurts more. Let them go. You're not responsible for their bitterness. The comments were full of hearts and, you got this babes and we stand a Phoenix Queen. She never said my name. But she didn't have to. I muted her. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood that attention, even angry attention, was still energy. And I wasn't giving her any more of mine. That night, I lit a candle, made tea, and let the phone sit on the kitchen counter screen down. Let them spin. Let them sulk. Let them shrink themselves into quotes and excuses. I wasn't reading the script anymore. A month later, I moved. Not far, just far enough that no one could drop by without warning. 2 hours south, near Paso Robles. Olive country. Fewer tasting rooms, more dirt roads. The kind of place where no one knew my grandmother's last name, and no one cared about wine ratings or curated aesthetics. I took a job at a boutique olive oil company. Small team, mostly women. One of them wore hiking boots to work every day and brought her dog to the office. Another swore like a trucker and still remembered to water the lobby plants. It was unpolished and a little chaotic, and I loved it. I rented a tiny apartment above a florist shop. The floors creaked, the windows stuck in their frames, and the kitchen sink drained a little slow. But it was mine. I furnished it with thrift store finds, a green velvet armchair, a bookshelf made from reclaimed wood, a chip table I painted sky blue on a whim. I kept the walls bare at first. I didn't want anything on them until I knew what I liked, not what I'd been taught to like. Every day after work, I walked to the corner market and bought whatever looked good. Apples, a wedge of soft cheese, a bottle of something with a handwritten label. No agenda, no calendar alerts. Just space. And then one afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a letter. Real paper. Handwritten. No return address. I almost tossed it, but something made me open it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, loopy, a little uneven. Sorry. You don't know me. We've never met. I used to partner with your family's vineyard on regional events. A few years ago, I tried to flag some irregularities with the billing system. Your cousin said I misunderstood the process. Your grandmother stopped returning my emails. I thought I was crazy. Or petty. Or maybe just not important enough to question anything. Then I heard what you did. Thank you. Not just for standing up, but for doing it without burning down the building. You made space. For the rest of us to speak too. I hope you're building something beautiful, wherever you are. Jay. I read it twice. Then a third time. Then I smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because someone praised me. Not because I'd won anything. But because something I did quietly, without spectacle, had echoed somewhere I couldn't see. I put the letter on the fridge with a chipped magnet shaped like a tomato. And I said out loud just to myself, this is enough. It wasn't the life I'd been born into. It was the one I was growing inch by inch on new soil. Time softened everything. Not in the way people promise, like pain just dissolves if you wait long enough. More like how old vines harden into wood. Still there. Still part of the plant. Just not fragile anymore. 3 months passed. Then 4. At first, the messages trickled in. A forwarded family group thread I hadn't left. A Christmas card with thinking of you, scrawled at the bottom. Then nothing. Silence, clean and undisturbed, like fresh snow. I heard through a friend of a friend that Mila had backed out of the Vineyard rebrand. Something about creative differences and too much heat. Eventually, her social media went quiet. No more pastel quotes about rebirth. No more yoga photos in winery doorways. Just a black square and a long caption about stepping back from public life. The Vineyard's marketing changed too. Less glam, more rustic. I guess the board had finally realized that aesthetic didn't grow grapes. I didn't check in. I didn't ask around. I didn't even Google them. I didn't need to. The absence felt like pruning. Things cut back not to kill but to clear. One night I came home late. The wind had picked up, and the windows in my little apartment shook just enough to remind me I was on my own. I kicked off my shoes, lit the stove, and poured a glass of my own blend. A little project I'd been tinkering with using local grapes and borrowed tools. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I reached into a drawer and pulled out a necklace I hadn't worn in years. Thin chain, small silver charm. I'd bought it after college with my first real paycheck. Back then it had felt bold. The pendant was a single word. Sovereign. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I hung it on the mirror above the kitchen sink where I could see it every morning. I sipped my wine. Stared at the reflection. Said it out loud, just once. Enough. Not in anger. Not in defeat. Just enough. Enough chasing approval. Enough second-guessing myself. Enough giving until there was nothing left but a title someone else could claim. The truth was I hadn't run away from anything. I'd stepped into something real. Something rooted. Not in their name. In mine.